This is Steve Cochran, and this is Live from My Office, the podcast. Wherever you get your podcast, make sure you click the like button, the subscribe button, the hey, I've got to have this button, whatever it is on your preferred podcast platform, and you'll get every single episode of Live from My Office. Glad you're here today. Tell your friends to come back and check us out as well, and also go to the website, CochranShow.com, for additional content there. All right, so Pat Brady's going to be on with us in just a few minutes to talk about the criminality of Mike Madigan. Is he ever going to be in enough trouble that he goes away? Well, we'll talk about it with Pat Brady coming up. But before we get to that, let's get to this. Not one, not two, but three things in my very special look at the news. Here's thing number one. The Golden Girls house is for sale. That's right. It's supposed to take place in Miami, of course, but the house is actually in the Brentwood area of Los Angeles. $3 million will get it for you, but I say get it furnished because, man, if that Davenport could talk. Meanwhile, here's a clip of the Golden Girls. This is Blanche. She's dirty.
Oh, I did it on a dare. You know, back where I come from, everybody thought that once you started shaving your legs, why, you'd become loose. So I shaved them.
What happened?
Oh, it was an old wives' tale. I didn't become loose for another year and a half.
Thing number two, the Chris Wallace interview with Donald Trump on Fox News Sunday. I'm sure you heard about it. Yeah, President Trump didn't come off so well because Chris Wallace actually asked him difficult questions that he would have to answer. That's how you throw him. You start throwing questions he has to answer, and you don't throw him any softballs, nothing but trouble. There was a whole thing about a cognitive test as well. We'll get to that in a second. But first, you know, Trump and the White House have been picking on Dr. Fauci. I don't like it. Here's Trump trying to explain his stance on the good doctor.
Dr. Fauci said, don't ban China. Don't ban China. I did. He then admitted that I was right.
But you made mistakes, too.
I guess everybody makes mistakes.
I was going to say, you said at one point...
It's one person coming in from China, and we have it under control. It's going to be just fine. When you have 15 people, and the 15 within a couple of days is going to be down to close to zero, that's a pretty good job we've done. I think we're going to be very good with the coronavirus. I think that at some point that's going to sort of just disappear, I hope. I'll be right eventually. I will be right eventually. You know, I said it's going to disappear. I'll say it again.
But
it's going to disappear.
I'll be right eventually. You actually will. And let's make thing number three, that cognitive exam that they got into a bit of a heated discussion over. This is a test that was given to President Trump because apparently everybody around him is worried. We don't know why in particular he took it, but he said he took it recently. Of course, he said he aced it. Of course, he didn't. And when Wallace questioned him on it, he said there's no way Chris Wallace could have done well on the last 5 questions because they were super hard. The questions on the test, which was found quickly by a bunch of internet sleuths, and I'm not making this up, included, what day is it? Where are you? And identify the following cartoon pictures. Those pictures were of a lion that only looked like a lion, a rhinoceros. Ooh, that's the horn thing, right? And a camel. Those were the super tough questions that Donald Trump had to answer in his cognitive exam. There was one other bonus question that he had to answer as well, and that's this one. How many Donald Trumps does it take to change a light bulb? Well, it turns out it's just one. One to blame Obama that the light bulb was blown out when he got there, and the same one to tell Mike Pence to change it because he'll do anything. That's your three things. 1, 2, 3 things in the news, and we get on with it now with my friend Pat Brady, one of my best friends, but, you know, I don't get out that much. Pat Brady. Pat, how are you?
I am fine, Steve. That's quite an introduction.
Yeah, well, you know, it's true. You are my friend, and I don't get out that much. I'm sure there's other options.
I don't know. I'm the only one that social distancing didn't affect, at least their social life. I was right in my zone. Yeah, no, I can't talk to you.
All right, so here's the deal. We live in a world where in the last month, and these are only 2 of the stories, but in the last month, we found out that the President of the United States has looked the other way on concentration camps in China and the Russians having bounties on American soldiers. Done nothing about it. Zero. Even after he found out about it in quotes, done nothing. Meanwhile, the Democrats in Illinois, well, what a shocker. We find out that Mike Madigan and ComEd are engaged in something that's so gratuitous, ComEd said, okay, we'll give you $200 million, just stop talking about us. What the hell is happening, Pat? How can this be normal?
Yeah, it's not. And you forgot to, on the Trump things that he ignored, he also didn't do anything to help Hong Kong as the Chinese crack down on the people there that want to have a democracy. So yeah, a lot of things going on, but the most striking is what happened with ComEd pleading guilty and the company pleading guilty to bribery charges, and then within the charges, pretty detailed explanation of how they did many things to bribe Speaker Madigan to get favorable legislation throughout from 2011 to 2019.
All right, now we know this. We know Madigan loves power. We know he's going to stay until he probably drops dead at his desk in Springfield. We know his district is going to continue to reelect him. But even in old school politics, with all the dominoes and the old Chicago way that Madigan set up to keep himself in power, how is this not going to take him out?
Yeah, with Madigan, as you know better than anybody, we've seen this time and time again. Back into the 90s, early 90s, everyone said he was going to be indicted for using state employees to work on his campaigns. Nothing ever happened there. So he's always close to the fire. But this one that came down with ComEd was so detailed to me. The takeaway from all of it is that Mike Madigan is the focus of this 1.5 year long public corruption investigation, and he would be the top priority of this investigation. But that he can't say anymore like he did a couple months ago, I'm not the target of anything. Well, it's clear he is the target of a federal investigation, which is pretty narrowly tailored to this, right now anyway, to this issue with Commonwealth Edison. Although that being said, at the same time, Commonwealth Edison, the company's pleading guilty to bribing Madigan, FBI agents down in Springfield delivered subpoenas to his office and for other companies he might have been dealing with, Walgreens, AT&T, and a couple other companies seeking information about that. So this investigation might be even broader than Commonwealth Edison.
All right, so bullet point it for us. What exactly did ComEd bribe Madigan for?
Favorable treatment on two big pieces of legislation. One in 2011, which dealt with the way that Commonwealth Edison could charge its customers. And then the second one is a similar piece of legislation, but it had to deal with renewable energy. So all this legislation has to do with how Commonwealth Edison can charge its users, and that's why within this charging document came out the other day, it said that this favorable legislation or favorable treatment by Madigan resulted in at least $150 million increase in profit for Commonwealth Edison.
And what does Madigan get for his efforts in this scam?
Well, the way he described it, a lot of times you think about corruption and it's some guy in a parking lot, some elected official in a parking lot getting a $5,000 envelope, of cash. But with Madigan, it's always been that he engages in this type of behavior to preserve his power. The favors here were to former employees, staffers, friends of Mike that ComEd hired, and they did it in a way to make it not entirely clear that they had hired these people, and that was, according to the charging documents, that was at the behest of Mike McLean, who said to ComEd that this is what Speaker Madigan would like. Long story short, hire Madigan's buddies, hire Madigan's campaign people, hire the people that got and kept Mike Madigan in power, and we'll do you favors with the legislation.
And some of you may go, yeah, well, you're rolling your eyes. You're going, well, that's politics. No, that's not politics. That is an absolute dirty way to do business. And even if it was done 40 years ago, 30 years ago, and maybe in still places done today, Madigan and Illinois seem to lead in continuing this bullshit. Is anywhere else in the country like this?
This probably, there's certain pockets of corruption everywhere, I think. And in local government, there's a lot of corruption, I think. But the last big boss in the country, like Madigan is he is the last big boss. Joe Bruno had a similar setup in New York, and he got indicted in 2008, 2009, and he's out of office. But Mike Madigan's the last of the old-time kind of ward boss politicians. And to your point about it, people go, oh, this is how politics is done. When a company engages in this kind of activity, hiring a legislator's employees and doing favors in the hopes of, not in the hopes of, with the promise of getting legislative favors, that's bribery. I mean, that's not politics. That's bribery, and it's always been illegal.
So you did this as a prosecutor and as a Fed. Those guys, formerly you guys, you don't bring this kind of case forward unless you've got it locked up, right?
Yeah, if you look through the U.S. Attorney's Manual and having been through the indictment review process, you don't charge unless there's a substantial likelihood you're going to get a conviction. They do have about a 95% conviction rate. Now, Commonwealth Edison here entered into what's called a deferred prosecution agreement. The feds filed this information, which is a charging document, charging them with Title 18, Section 666 bribery. It's a bribery case, and if they pay the $200 million, fully cooperate, implement these remedial controls at the organization, this case is going to go away. And that's what they call a deferred prosecution agreement. But the argument now is that they've certainly have overwhelming evidence, and that ComEd as a company itself has admitted to bribing Madigan. There are other people that are involved from ComEd that aren't part of this agreement, meaning the former CEO, their in-house lobbyists, and some others. So probably the next shoe to drop will be either some of those folks pleading guilty and cooperating, or those folks being charged.
The money piece of this, look, if money and power are what always motivates a crime, a scam in politics like this, Madigan supposedly has all the money he'll ever need. Plus, how did he make it?
I don't really know. I know what anecdotally it is. He has a very successful tax appeal law firm downtown, and which, according to the very exhaustive series of Tribune's done over the years, the scam there is the commercial business owners downtown, the ones that own the big buildings, go to Madigan to get their property tax amounts lowered, and he would take a third of that. So he made a ton of money doing that. Now, again, this has never been charged, but the allegations are that the old assessor's office and some others artificially jacked the prices up. So Madigan, the other political folks that are involved in this, go in and get a tax, get your taxes lowered, take their third. So it's just kind of a big scam. But the reality is the people that end up paying for that, since it's a big pot, are the residential property owners, particularly in the poor areas that had to. There's so much tax revenue that the state needs, or the city needs, or the county needs, and they're going to get it from somebody. If they're not getting it from the commercial buildings, they're going to get it from the poor people, and that's kind of what happened.
Well, and it goes back to the ComEd story as well, right? I mean, this is not just a ComEd Mike Madigan little game they were playing. Higher bills get passed on to the consumer, so the public, it costs them more money. That's why you should be upset about this.
Yeah, and that point really hasn't been made too much in the media since this has happened. To me, that's the first thing I thought. I'm like, wow, all the things that you're messing around with, there's legislation you could mess around with that's not going to have a huge impact on a whole lot of people. But Commonwealth Edison provides 70% of the power in the state to the citizens of Illinois. And if there was monkey business going on with how they were allowed to set their rates, yeah, the damage to the public is probably incalculable. If in the charging documents, they actually the figure that they said Commonwealth Edison benefited was like $450 million, but they only made them pay $200 because they jumped on the sword and cooperated. So that's a big issue that hasn't been discussed much. Now, that being said, it was clear, and the U.S. Attorney made it clear, that Commonwealth Edison paying this $200 million, that cannot come from ratepayers. And I read in the paper today that they're going to borrow this money from their parent company, Exelon, and then pay them back from profits.
When Pat Fitzgerald was U.S. Attorney and took down Rod Blagojevich, he had a great interest in stopping corruption. Mike Madigan, and this is no secret that I feel this way, and I know that you have certainly felt this way. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but Mike Madigan is the most corrupt guy in Illinois. So how much of this can be, it's time for him to go for the greater good of Illinois and take him out, because this has always been about him. It's never been about the people of Illinois, and we can't take it anymore. And what about people that should be rolling over on him? Where are those folks?
Yeah, it's a good question, and it may still be coming. Like I said, as you know, these investigations go incrementally, and now with at least half of the part of a bribery scheme having fully and completely admitted guilt and cooperating, that being Commonwealth Edison, the company. You got to remember that it's important that it was the company that pled guilty or entered into this deferred prosecution agreement with the feds. The company, there's still people within that company that were the actual actors involved that maybe have legal liability. So, but to answer your question, it's not is it just legal questions? What's going to happen is political questions. And Speaker Madigan every 2 years is up for re-election for his speakership, and the Democrats in the House, they're the ones that elect him. So it'll be interesting to see if the dam ever breaks and people start saying, hey, enough's enough. But that's going to take some real high-level Democrats. Particularly, there's a lot of really vocal, energetic women in the House Democratic caucus. If they start breaking, then I think Speaker Madigan won't be Speaker in January.
Governor Pritzker came out and said if these allegations are true, he must resign. The he is Madigan, and Madigan is somebody who Pritzker has given big money to through the years. How big a statement is that from Pritzker, and will it have any impact?
I think it was as big a statement as he could make. The introduction to that statement, if this is true, gives him some wiggle room, but I think he made it pretty clear that this is pretty bad. This is as bad as I've seen it, meaning insofar as the public allegations. It's not just urban legend corruption talk. This is the Fed saying this is exactly what happened. And we talked about this when this broke 15, 16 months ago, and we started figuring out that all these associates of Madigan, their homes are being raided and wiretapped. But the reason this always rings so true to me insofar as the ability of the federal government to put a case together is because I know from working that this is how it works. Mike McLean, the guy that he's Madigan's bag man, for lack of a better term, this is how when you go to Springfield, everything was filtered through him. There was a favored list of lobbyists and people in the state that Madigan dealt with. And it's not surprising to me at all when I read this charging document. Yeah, this is exactly how it's worked. It's worked this way for a long time. It's been illegal for a long time, and now they're finally getting caught for it.
The fallacy that guys like Madigan or Mitch McConnell, that Madigan's done great things for Illinois, that Mitch McConnell's done great things for Kentucky, that Trump is doing great things for the country. These are all self-centered, me first and nothing else until me first people who really have done an amazing job of convincing people they're working for them. Are we not paying enough attention, or are they just really good at it?
Well, a couple things. I mean, look at, and this is what I've always thought and said, and even when I was party chairman, when we would go after the speaker and say, okay, maybe some of this we can tolerate if the place is run well. But Illinois has so many problems, and they're fiscal problems. We're spending more than we're taking in. We've got so many issues that relate directly to what has been done in Springfield, particularly as it relates to pensions, which is not just Madigan's fault. That's Republicans were involved in that too. That, yeah, you wonder. But in Madigan's case, he wins his district. He gets his 8,000 or 9,000 votes, whatever he needs. Those are solidly locked in, so he's never going to be defeated. But what might change now is the fact that his own party has to elect him to be Speaker and Chairman of the Democratic Party. And they're going to continue to do that with this federal investigation hanging over.
Yeah, and let's not lose sight of what you just said, because he has been in charge for 40 years. He's been around for longer than that, and Illinois has cratered on his watch. He gets absolute credit for that, including the fact that all the time he's been House Speaker, he's been in charge of the money. So have we done a poor job of reporting that?
No, it's reported. It's just as I said, he's for better or worse, he's done a fantastic job of maintaining his power. I remember when it first was elected to the Republican National Committee 12 years ago, and a former ambassador, I had lunch with him here. Guy knows, a former ambassador who lived in Illinois, and told me, he goes, the only thing Madigan cares about at all is maintaining power. It's not, it has nothing to do with really good, sound public policy. That's not really the consideration. It's all about maintaining power. So when you spend your time concentrating on that, and give him credit, he's done a good job at that. the first question that he asked anybody that wants to run for state representative that's going to be in his caucus is, will you vote for me for speaker? Well, question one. And will you vote to adopt the rules that he's implemented to run the legislature? That's it. There's no political philosophy there or issue philosophy. It's all about, will you keep me in power if I help you get elected? And that's what he's done. He's been run a very effective political organization, getting his people elected, and the people that get elected rely on that. So you give him credit for that, but he's not a policy guy, never has been. And this ComEd situation just underscores that. It wasn't about good rate setting policy for the public. It was about him keeping power. This is a clear example of exactly how it's worked the last 50 years.
You know, I see a lot of shows on TV. That's probably not the best source, but it seems the bad guys, when they get caught, even if they're really good at being bad guys, get a little sloppy. And that helps the people that chase the bad guys, like you did as a prosecutor, to be able to nail them. So if you don't have people rolling over on Madigan, has he reached a point in his life, I think he's 80 or close to it, where maybe he got a little sloppy this time around, and maybe there's enough there?
Yeah, you make a good point on somebody gets sloppy, and that's how it always happens. And in this case, the sloppy, borderline incompetent was Mike McLean, his bagman, whose house was raided 13, 14 months ago, and they also did wiretaps on his phone. McLean couldn't have been more. The sloppiness is unbelievable. The emails talking about, hey, don't put in this in writing. Hey, this is what Madigan expects. Hire these people, or hire these interns, or hire this law firm.
Really?
super sloppy. And that's just to your point. This is McLean. I don't think Madigan slipped up, other than the fact that he relied so heavily on a guy like Mike McLean, who's a political operative, but incredibly sloppy and incredibly arrogant. And that's what McLean. I don't think McLean will ever flip on Madigan, ever, unless he's looking at some huge jail time.
But again, I go back to why. Just basic human motivation. What has Mike McLean gotten from Mike Madigan that's so great that he'd be willing to go to jail for him?
A ton of money. They were buddies in the legislature way back in the 70s. But McLean made a whole lot of, 7-figure money yearly as a lobbyist. And when you think about it, if you're Mike McLean and you are the only ear, really, of the most powerful guy in the state that controls the entire legislative process in the fifth largest state in the country, you can bring that influence to clients. You're going to make a ton of money. And that's what McLean did. I think there's a friendship there, too, and a mutual admiration, but McLean made a ton of money. If you look at Madigan, too, he kind of puts these people around him that are just completely loyal. But with McLean gone and someone like his former chief of staff, Tim Mapes, gone, Madigan's kind of out there right now on an island. He doesn't have his longtime loyal allies with him anymore, so he's kind of on his own right now.
The FBI called me in once about people that I knew, and they wanted to build a case on them, and what did I have? And I didn't have enough. I told them I'd be happy to see you send these people to jail, but I don't have enough to help you, and they have plenty to work on, so they had to move on to other things. The people eventually were never charged. In the case of prosecutors chasing this, their attention span in this case seems to be pretty long. Can we make any ties to the length of this investigation, how much has happened in the past couple of years and now continues to happen, and where this could end up? In other words, this doesn't look like anything the feds are going to walk away from.
No. Then this a couple things, and usually these cases, and the feds are notorious for taking way too much time in doing these things because they have long statutes of limitation. Meaning they can drag them out for a long time, and they tend to take a long time. Even when I was there, I'm like, why is this taking so long? We should be able to do this faster. But this point one, you could see where this ComEd thing was going from the first time that McLean's home was raided. You kind of knew where we're going, which is a fairly narrowly tailored scheme. Now, with these new subpoenas going out, maybe they're broadening their scheme where there was similar type of activity with other big Illinois and national companies. Yeah, probably that's where they're going. So that's pretty narrowly focused. There's another theory, too, that we talked about before that they could potentially, if the evidence is there, and we haven't seen it yet, charge this as a great big RICO, which is how they used to charge the old mobsters, and still charge the mobsters, Racketeering Influence Corrupt Organization Act. And I could see potentially where you charge the Democratic Party as a corrupt enterprise and bring all this stuff, the Sandoval, all this other stuff. It's kind of the other piece of the investigations we've seen in the last couple of years. I'm not sure how likely that is to happen, but it could be charged as a big RICO too, I think.
If Madigan were to resign in the next 6 months, and I don't see it happening, and I know you don't either, but if he did, would that take any of the heat off him?
No, and I think it's already set in motion. And if you were advising him, and I'm not, but if I were, I would say, hey, don't give up your biggest chit. Meaning, if they do come to you and say we're going to indict you, saying, okay, I'll resign my speakership and House spot, and let's work a deal out. So that is a pretty big card he holds, insofar as things that he could give the government, so wouldn't go hard on him. But like you said, he's 78 years old. If he gets convicted of, think about the guideline calculation on this scam with ComEd, it would be huge. I mean, he'd die in prison.
Right, and you make a point at 78, and you and I have talked about this, in the past on various occasions. The guy has no hobbies. He doesn't have friends. He doesn't have hobbies. He doesn't really have anything to go home to. So his incentive to give up the thing that is the reason he gets out of bed in the morning has always been pretty small.
Yeah, and it's funny you say that. You know our friend Rick Pearson, right?
Yeah, sure.
His writing on this and on all this politics is so good. And I texted him last night to tell him that. But he wrote another article along with others today in the Tribune where one of Madigan's friends is quoted as saying, we tried to get Mike out a long time ago, said, hey, time to go. You've made all your money. You've done everything you can. Why don't you resign? And according to Pearson's article, quoting one of Madigan's friends, Madigan even said, he goes, what else am I going to do? And I mean, that's in today's Tribune. So that is the point. Anybody that knows him well, and as I've been told, says that's kind of why he stays there. He loves what he's doing, and politically, whether you like him or not, he's been hugely successful politically.
Until he dies in office or is removed by this, can Illinois get better in the big picture?
Yeah, I think it can, because he's not. The saying goes, "Good government's good politics." So as much as he's not into the policy, you can't. You have to show that you're at least trying to run the state competently, and I think the state can. But we've got to get this. We're spending more than we're taking in. We've got a huge crime problem in the hugely populated area of Chicago. There's so many other issues: property tax relief, education, that need to be addressed before the state's going to return to its glory days. Yeah, it can happen, but say it does happen, there is going to be a power struggle within the Democratic Party to take over that spot. And the real interesting thing will be to watch: does the left or the far left part of the progressive caucus in the House get control, or is it a more moderate Democrat? I think it's good for the state if it's a more moderate Democrat that can actually reach across the aisle and get things done and enact policies that aren't crazy leftist stuff.
Well, that's the interesting thing that ties the state of Illinois to the federal government. Biden, in the latest polls, is as much as 15 points. These are legitimate polls, not nonsense polls. 15 points ahead of Trump. So assuming this all holds and he wins the White House, and you've told me, and you follow this stuff more than anybody, the Senate's absolutely up for grabs. In the event of a White House win or a sweep where the Democrats control the Senate and the House, the worst thing they could do is the worst thing that could be done in Illinois if you're replacing Madigan, and that's act on vengeance. If the Democrats then go, I can't believe what you Republicans did to us, now you're going to get yours. Or if whoever comes in and replaces Madigan says, I can't believe we didn't get ours because this guy was doing his thing the whole time, now we're going to get ours. You absolutely have to, more than ever in the world we live in, you've got to have people say, I'm going to be moderate and I'm going to work with the other side. And I just don't have any faith in it. I wish I did, because everybody's in it for themselves.
Yeah, and that's where the tone set at the top. And I do think that Joe Biden, the Republicans are trying to portray him as some tool of the far left, which he's not. He's a fairly moderate Democrat and has been forever, kind of old school
100%.
Democrat. So along those lines, don't be vengeful. Don't go too far to the left. That's what Obama did, President Obama in 2008. Everything was far left. We're going to pay off your mortgages, the Affordable Care Act, and so on. In 2010, they got creamed. They lost 80 or 63 seats in the House.
Right.
We had probably one of the best years we've had here since the early 90s. So the lesson to be learned there, like you said, don't be vengeful. And then secondly, don't go too far to the left. This AOC movement that's in the U.S. House is crazy talk. Just don't buy into that stuff.
Yeah, you should never know the people that are representing you in the state or nationally as celebrities. They should never be celebrities. And there's a whole celebrity politician culture now.
Oh, absolutely. AOC with a million Twitter followers, and I mean, I don't know how much time she spends in her district, but the stuff that she spouts out, and she's tempered it a little bit because I think they told her to. I mean, it is socialist crazy talk. And anybody that knows anything about history, which I assume people who listen to your podcast do, socialism has never worked.
Never
worked. And
not a single instance.
And I think it was Lenin or Marx, one of the two, said socialism is the bridge to communism. How's that working for you? You want to go be in Hong Kong or be in one of the gulags in China? That gulag thing you brought up at the top of this thing, it's unbelievable that we've ignored that.
Right. And Trump has looked the other way. Well, the next time we talk, we'll talk about Trump and Biden. And we'll do this a little more regularly because I'm going to focus on the last 100 days of Donald Trump going into the election because this has to end. And you said it well when you said it starts at the top. We've had no leadership from the top about anything other than making Donald Trump's day better, and that cannot continue and cannot ever happen again.
And I know you can't discuss politics anymore rationally with people. And I love politics as you do. I just don't talk about it anymore because everybody's really heated up about it.
Yeah, you're talking about socially, like if you're playing golf with somebody or whatever. Yeah.
I don't even. And I love politics more than sports. I love politics, and I just don't talk. The only thing I will say, I'll say this to anybody: the country deserves better.
Right. Exactly.
You can't. I could go point by point, but I'd be talking to you all day.
Haven't you had enough? This is the United States of America. We deserve better. Not me, not you. Yeah. We deserve better than this.
There are a lot of hardworking, good people in this country. I still believe that. It's still the best model, and we deserve better than we're getting from the guy in the White House.
Well said, Pat Brady. Pat Brady is more than just a handsome devil on a golf course. And a guy that knows Springfield. He's also a guy with a great head of hair. And that's one of the reasons I'm bitter.
Man, you know what? This gray hair dye is really kicking in.
Yeah. I know the ladies love you. It's my friend Pat Brady on Live from my office. Thank you, Pat. Thanks again to my friend Pat Brady. He is a friend of the show, and that goes through the radio and right here to the podcast as well. Listen, I thank you for listening, and I hope you will tell a friend or two. You can also drop me a line anytime with a question, an answer, a thought at thecochranshow@gmail.com. That's thecochranshow@gmail.com. And in the future, hear your podcast wherever you listen to them. You can also check it out on the website. All the podcasts are there as well, including some of your favorites from the social media days. Ooh, that seems like months ago. We started that way back in March. Ugh, God, 2020. So thanks again for listening. Thanks for being here. My name is Steve Cochran. This is Live from my office. See you next time.
Live from my office is a product of Monkey Run Productions. All rights reserved. Live from my office is mixed, edited, and produced by me, Ross Cochran, and hosted by Steve Cochran. Let us know what you think about a specific episode by leaving a comment wherever you're listening, or you can email questions and comments to thecochranshow@gmail.com. Steve is available for your corporate speaking gigs. He would love to host or MC your event, and occasionally, he's funny. Thank you for listening. Head to CochranShow.com for more.